The ballroom of Hartington House blazed with 1,000 candles, their flames dancing in crystal chandeliers that cast fractured rainbows across silk gowns and gleaming jewels. London's elite had gathered for the Countess of Hartington's annual spring ball, and the air hummed with laughter, music, and the particular electricity of social ambition. Maren Lydgate stood in the shadow of a marble pillar, invisible. This was, she had learned, the safest place to be. Close enough to fulfill the social obligation of attendance. Far enough to avoid the pitying glances that inevitably followed her through every ballroom in London. At 25, she had perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight. Not that she was unpleasant to look at. Her copper-gold hair caught the candlelight when she allowed it to, and her eyes, a striking shade of amber that her mother had once called lion's eyes, drew attention when she forgot to keep them downcast. But attention was dangerous for a woman in her position. 2 years ago, her father had died. He had left behind 3 things: a crumbling estate in Dorset, a mountain of debts that still made her wake gasping in the night, and a letter she had never been able to bring herself to burn. A letter that simply said, "Forgive me, my darling girl. I tried to save us. I pray I have not damned you instead." She had never understood what he meant. The debts had been mysteriously settled 1 month after his death. The solicitor, a nervous man named Pettifer, had assured her that an anonymous benefactor had intervened. She had asked questions. He had provided no answers. Eventually, she had stopped asking, too consumed with the daily business of survival to pursue ghosts. Now she lived in a modest townhouse with her ailing mother and younger sister, stretching every pound until it screamed for mercy, maintaining the facade of genteel respectability through sheer force of will. A waltz began. Couples swept onto the floor in a swirl of color and grace. Maren watched them with detachment. She had danced once, years ago, before everything fell apart. A young baronet with kind eyes had asked her, and for 3 minutes, she had felt like she belonged in this glittering world. He had married an heiress 6 months later. She did not blame him. "Lady Maren Lydgate?" The voice came from directly behind her, and she startled badly, nearly knocking into the pillar. A footman in unfamiliar livery stood there, his expression carefully blank. "Yes?" "You are requested in the east drawing room, immediately." Maren frowned. "Requested by whom?" "I am not at liberty to say, my lady, but I am instructed to tell you that it concerns your father's estate." Her stomach tightened. Then a chill swept through her, settling into her bones. "My father has been dead for 2 years." "Yes, my lady." The footman's expression did not change. "Will you follow me?" Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to return to her shadowed pillar and pretend this conversation had never happened. But the mention of her father's estate had lodged like a hook beneath her ribs. "I tried to save us. I pray I have not damned you instead." "Lead the way," she heard herself say. The footman turned and walked. Maren followed, dread building with every step. The east drawing room was smaller than Maren expected, intimate rather than imposing, decorated in shades of midnight blue and silver. A fire crackled in the hearth despite the mild spring evening, and standing before it, his back to her, was a man. He was tall. That was her first impression. Tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in evening clothes so perfectly tailored they could only have come from the finest tailor in London. His hair was dark, almost black, worn slightly longer than fashion dictated, curling against his collar. The footman withdrew, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like a death knell. "Please," the man said without turning, "sit. I prefer to stand." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Who are you, and what do you want?" He turned then, and Maren felt the air leave her lungs. He was quite simply the most striking man she had ever seen. Not handsome in the conventional sense. His features were too sharp for that, too severe. High cheekbones carved like cliff faces, a jaw that could have been cut from granite. Dark brows slashed over eyes the color of a winter storm, gray threaded with silver, and utterly cold. He looked at her the way a wolf might look at a rabbit. "I am Caius Ashworth," he said. "Duke of Dunmere." Morin recognized the name. Everyone in England knew the Duke of Dunmere, at least by reputation. Obscenely wealthy, reclusive, rumored to be either a saint or a devil, depending on who was telling the tale. He had inherited the dukedom 3 years ago upon his father's death, and had promptly retreated to his northern estates, rarely appearing in London society. Why would such a man summon her to a private room? "Your Grace." She did not curtsy. Something in his manner made her stubborn. "I confess myself confused. We have never been introduced." "No." He moved to a writing desk near the window and picked up a leather portfolio. "We have not. But we are, nonetheless, intimately connected." "I beg your pardon?" He opened the portfolio and withdrew a document, yellowed with age and bearing an elaborate wax seal. "Do you recognize this crest?" Morin moved closer, despite herself. The seal showed a stag and a rose intertwined, surmounted by a ducal coronet. "The seal of Dunmere," she said. "Your family crest." "Correct. And this signature at the bottom. Do you recognize that as well?" She looked. Her blood turned to ice. "Edmund Lydgate," her father's hand. She would know it anywhere. "Where did you get this?" Her voice had gone hoarse. "What is this document?" "It is a marriage contract." The Duke's tone was matter-of-fact, almost bored. "Signed by your father and my father 3 years ago, shortly before my father's death. It stipulated that upon your 25th birthday, you would become my wife." The room tilted. Morin gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. "That is impossible." "I assure you it is not. My father would never." She stopped, the words tangling in her throat. "I tried to save us. I never agreed to any marriage." "Your agreement was not required. Your father acted as your legal guardian. His signature bound you." "Then it is not valid. A woman cannot be married without her knowledge or consent." "In most circumstances, you would be correct." The Duke set down the document and withdrew another. "However, this contract was executed under Scottish law, where such arrangements remain binding. Additionally, a proxy ceremony was conducted in Edinburgh on your 25th birthday. 6 months ago." He paused, letting the words land like hammer blows. "I was present. You were represented by a solicitor acting in your stead, as stipulated in the original contract." Morin stared at him. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the ballroom, music played on, oblivious to the fact that her entire world was crumbling. "You are telling me," she said slowly, each word precise as a scalpel, "that I am already married. To you." "Yes. Without my knowledge. Your father made provisions. I knew of the contract's existence for years, though I fought against it bitterly when it was first proposed. My father overruled me. When he died, I inherited the obligation along with everything else." "And you went ahead with the ceremony anyway, without informing me?" Something flickered in those storm-gray eyes. "I had my reasons." Morin felt hysteria bubbling up in her chest, pressing against her ribs like a caged bird. This was madness. This was a nightmare from which she would surely wake. "I'm not marrying you," she said, her voice rising despite her best efforts at control. "I do not care what documents you possess, or what ceremonies were conducted without my presence. I am not your wife. I will never be your wife. I refuse." The Duke of Dunmere looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, devastatingly, he smiled. It transformed his face entirely, made him look almost human, almost warm. It was the most frightening thing she had ever seen. "Lady Marin," he said softly, "you misunderstand. I am not asking for your hand. I am informing you of a legal reality." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell sandalwood and something richer, earthier. "You are already my wife. You have been for 6 months. The only question that remains is what we intend to do about it." Marin's mind raced through possibilities like a fox seeking escape from hounds. "I will contest it," she said, "in court. I will argue that the contract was signed under duress, that my father was not of sound mind, Your father was examined by 3 physicians in the weeks before signing." The Duke cut her off with clinical precision. "All attested to his mental competence. The contract was witnessed by a magistrate and 2 barristers. It has been reviewed by the finest legal minds in England." He paused. "It is ironclad, Lady Marin. I made certain of that before proceeding with the ceremony." "Why?" The word tore from her throat. "Why would you do this? Why would you want a wife who did not choose you, who did not even know you existed until 5 minutes ago?" "That," he said, "is a conversation for another time. It is a conversation for now." She stepped toward him, her fear transmuting into fury. "You have just informed me that my entire life has been decided without my consent. I believe I am entitled to an explanation." The Duke studied her with an expression she could not read. "You have fire. Good. You will need it. Do not patronize me. I am not." He moved to the fireplace, resting one arm on the mantel. In the flickering light, the severe planes of his face softened slightly. "Your father came to mind 3 years ago, drowning in debt. Creditors circling. Your family estate weeks away from seizure. He begged for help." Marin's stomach churned. She had known it was bad. She had not known it was that bad. "My father agreed to settle all debts in exchange for a marriage alliance. Your bloodline is ancient, your family's reputation impeccable, despite recent financial difficulties. It was, from his perspective, an advantageous match for our house." "And from your perspective?" "I opposed the arrangement from the moment I learned of it." His jaw tightened. "I argued with my father for hours. I found the entire concept of trading a woman like property repugnant. But he would not be moved, and as long as he lived, his word was law." "Then why honor it after his death? You are a duke. You could have destroyed the contract, paid off whatever obligations existed, walked away." "I could have," he agreed. "I chose not to." "Why?" He turned to face her fully, and something in his expression made her nerves spark with warning. "Because the moment I destroy that contract, every debt your father owed comes due, immediately. The settlement was contingent upon the marriage being fulfilled. If I void it, the creditors will descend on your family within the week." He paused. "Your mother, your sister, they will lose everything. You will lose everything." The words hit her like physical blows. "You cannot mean that." "I never say things I do not mean." He withdrew a folded paper from his jacket. "This is a list of your father's original creditors, the amounts owed, the penalties that will accrue if the debts are reinstated." He held it out. "Read it." Marin took the paper with numb fingers. The figures blurred before her eyes. £10,000. 12,000, 8,000. The total was staggering, more money than she would see in 10 lifetimes. "This would destroy us," she whispered. "Yes." She looked up at him, this cold, calculating man who held her fate in his hands. "So my choice is what? Marry you, or watch my family be cast into the streets?" "Your choice," he said, "is to acknowledge publicly what is already true legally. We are married, Lady Marin. We have been for 6 months. I am not asking you to pretend affection. I am not asking for a love match. I am asking you to accept reality and make the best of it. And if I refuse? If I choose poverty over being shackled to a man I do not know?" He retrieved the paper from her trembling hands. "Then I will respect your decision. I will void the contract, and within a fortnight, your mother will be in a debtor's prison, and your sister will be forced into service. Is your pride worth their suffering?" Marin felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of him. You are a monster." "Perhaps." He did not seem offended. "But I am a monster who is offering you a way out, a comfortable life, security for your family. All you need do is be my wife in name." "In name?" "We will live as husband and wife publicly, attend events together, maintain appearances. In private, you may have your own rooms, your own pursuits, and your own life. I ask only for discretion and the appearance of a functional marriage." "Why?" The question burst from her again. "What do you gain from this arrangement? You could marry anyone, an heiress, a foreign princess. Why trap yourself with an unwilling wife?" For the first time, something like genuine emotion crossed his face, a shadow of pain, quickly suppressed. "Because I have no intention of ever marrying for love," he said quietly. "And a wife who expects nothing from me emotionally is precisely what I require." The words hung between them, heavy with implications she did not yet understand. Marin looked at the list of debts, at the door behind which the glittering ballroom continued its oblivious revelry, at the man who was apparently already her husband. She thought of her mother, growing weaker by the day. She thought of her sister, only 17, with her whole life ahead of her. She thought of her father's letter, still folded in her desk drawer. "I tried to save us." "If I agree," she said slowly, "I have conditions." The Duke's eyebrow rose. "Conditions?" "I'm not livestock to be traded. If you want my cooperation, you will treat me with respect. You will allow me to maintain contact with my family. You will not parade me before society like a trophy. And you will never, ever lie to me again." She expected him to refuse, to dismiss her demands with aristocratic disdain. Instead, he inclined his head. "Acceptable." Just like that. "I have no interest in cruelty, Lady Marin. I have interest in a functional arrangement that benefits us both." He moved toward the door. "My carriage will collect you tomorrow morning at 10. You will need to pack your belongings. As my wife, you will reside at Ashworth House." "Tomorrow," her voice cracked. "But I have not said yes." He paused, hand on the door handle, and looked back at her over his shoulder. That devastating smile had returned. "You will," he said. "You have no other choice." And he left her standing alone in the firelight, the ashes of her old life settling around her like snow. Marin did not remember the carriage ride home. She must have walked through the ballroom, must have collected her wrap and made her excuses to Lady Hardington, must have climbed into the hired hack and given the driver her address. But all of it passed in a fog, her mind circling endlessly around a single impossible truth. "You are already my wife." The townhouse on Bellamy Street was dark when she arrived, save for a single candle burning in the front window. Her mother's signal. "I'm still awake. Come speak to me." Marin paid the driver with coins she could not afford to spare and stood on the pavement, staring at that flickering light. How could she possibly explain this? How could she walk through that door and tell her mother that her dead husband had sold her eldest daughter to a stranger? The door opened before she could decide. Marin. Her sister Ottilie stood silhouetted in the doorway, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her young face creased with worry. "It is nearly midnight. Where have you been? Mother has been frantic." "I was delayed." The lie tasted like ash. "Is she awake?" "She refused to sleep until you returned. She is in the parlor." Ottilie stepped aside to let her pass, then caught her arm. "Maren, what is wrong? You look as though you have seen a ghost." "I have," Maren thought. Father's ghost, reaching up from the grave to drag me under. "We will talk in the morning," she said aloud. "Go to bed, Tilly. Everything is fine." But her sister's eyes, the same amber as her own, saw too much. They always had. The parlor was small and shabbily genteel, the furniture worn thin from years of use, the wallpaper faded to a color that might once have been rose. Sibella Lydgate sat in her customary chair by the fire, a shawl wrapped around her thin shoulders, her once beautiful face now gaunt with illness and worry. "My darling." Her mother's voice was weak but warm. "You look troubled. What happened at the ball?" Maren knelt beside her mother's chair, taking those frail hands in her own. They were cold. They were always cold now. "Mother, I need to tell you something. Something about Father." Sibella's expression flickered. "What about him?" "Before he died." Maren forced the words out. "He signed a contract, a marriage contract, with the Duke of Dunmere." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the pop of embers in the grate. "I know," her mother whispered. Maren went still. "What?" "I know, my darling." Tears slipped down Sibella's hollow cheeks. "I have known since the day he signed it. He told me everything. He wept in my arms and begged my forgiveness for what he had done." "You knew?" The betrayal cut deeper than anything the Duke had said. "You knew, and you never told me." "He made me swear. He said if you knew, you would refuse, and then everything would be lost." Her mother's grip tightened. "He was trying to save us, Maren. The creditors were coming. We would have been in the streets within a month. The Duke's father offered a way out, and your father took it. What else could he have done?" "He could have told me the truth." Maren pulled her hands away, rising to her feet. "He could have given me a choice." "And what choice would you have made?" Her mother's voice turned sharp. "Would you have watched your sister sold into service? Would you have nursed me in a workhouse as I died? Would you have sacrificed everything for the sake of pride?" The words struck like blows because they were true. Maren would have refused. She would have raged against the injustice and fought until there was nothing left to fight for, and in the end, her family would have paid the price. "The Duke came to me tonight," she said quietly. "He told me about the contract, about the proxy ceremony. He says we are already married." "And what did you tell him?" "What could I tell him?" Maren sank into the opposite chair, suddenly exhausted. "He has trapped me as surely as Father did. If I refuse to acknowledge the marriage, every debt comes due. We lose everything." Sibella was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into the pocket of her dressing gown and withdrew a folded letter. "Your father left this for you. He made me promise to give it to you when the time came." She held it out with trembling hands. "I believe the time has come." Maren took the letter. The paper was soft with age, the seal broken. Her father's handwriting, cramped and desperate, covered the page. "My dearest Maren, if you are reading this, then the Duke has found you, and you know the truth of what I have done. I will not ask your forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I ask you to understand. The young Duke opposed this arrangement from the start. He argued with his father for hours, called it barbaric, and demanded alternatives. But his father would not yield, and the son had no legal power to stop him. When I saw how fiercely he fought against it, I felt a strange hope. He's not the villain in this story, Maren. If anything, he is as much a prisoner of circumstance as you. I know I have stolen your choice. I know I have damned myself in your eyes. But I have given you a future, my darling girl. Please, take it. Your loving father Marin read the letter twice, 3 times. The words blurred through her tears. He fought against it, she whispered. The Duke did not want this marriage any more than I did. Then perhaps, her mother said gently, you have more in common than you realize. The fire burned low. Outside, the city slept on, unaware that Marin Lydgate's entire world had been rewritten in a single evening. His carriage comes tomorrow, she said finally. He expects me to move into his residence. And will you go? Marin looked at her mother's tired face, at the threadbare shawl, at the peeling wallpaper, and the single candle they could barely afford. She thought of Ottilie, bright and ambitious, deserving of a future better than poverty could provide. Yes, she said, I will go. The Duke of Dunmare's carriage arrived at precisely 10 o'clock. It was magnificent, of course. Gleaming black lacquer with the Ashworth crest emblazoned on the door, drawn by 4 matched grays that probably cost more than her family's entire townhouse. The footman who descended to collect her single trunk wore livery finer than her best dress. Marin climbed into the carriage with her chin held high and her nerves wound tight. The interior was even more opulent than the exterior. Velvet seats the color of aged burgundy, brass fittings polished to a mirror shine, and sitting across from her, watching her with those unnerving gray eyes, was her husband. Good morning, Lady Marin. His voice was crisp, formal. I trust you slept well. I did not sleep at all. She settled into her seat with rigid posture. I spent the night explaining to my mother why I must abandon her to live with a stranger. You are not abandoning her. You are ensuring her survival. How comforting. The carriage lurched into motion. Through the window, Marin watched her childhood home recede into the distance. Ottilie stood on the front step, one hand raised in farewell, her face wet with tears. Something inside Marin cracked. Your sister will want for nothing. The Duke's voice interrupted her grief. I have already instructed my solicitor to establish an allowance for your family. Your mother will have the best physicians. Your sister will have a proper season when the time comes. Marin turned to stare at him. Why would you do that? Because they are now my family as well. He said it simply, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. I do not neglect my responsibilities, Lady Marin. Whatever you may think of me, I am not a monster. You trapped me into marriage without my knowledge or consent. I revealed a marriage that already existed. There is a difference. A semantic one. Perhaps. He leaned back against the velvet seat, studying her with an unreadable gaze. But the result is the same. We are bound together, you and I. The question is whether we spend the next decades at war or find some way to coexist. Marin had no answer to that. The carriage rolled through increasingly affluent neighborhoods. Grand townhouses gave way to grander ones. Parks and squares replaced crowded streets. And finally, they turned onto a wide avenue lined with ancient oaks, at the end of which stood a house that stole her breath. Ashworth House was not merely large, it was palatial. 3 stories of honey-colored stone, fronted by columns that would not have looked out of place on a Greek temple, with wings stretching out on either side like the arms of some great stone giant. Formal gardens spread before it, immaculately maintained, and a fountain depicting Neptune and his horses dominated the circular drive. "Welcome home," the Duke said dryly. Marin could not speak. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions. Mrs. Blackthorne, the housekeeper, a stern-faced woman with kind eyes. Pemberton, the butler, ancient and dignified. A parade of footmen and maids whose names she would never remember. And finally, climbing the grand staircase, the Duke led her to her new apartments. They were beautiful. A sitting room in shades of ivory and gold, A bedroom with a canopied bed, larger than her entire room at home, a private dressing room, a bathing chamber with an actual copper tub. Windows overlooked the gardens, and fresh flowers filled crystal vases on every surface. "These were my mother's rooms," the Duke said, watching her take it all in. "She died when I was 12. They have not been used since." Marin turned to look at him. For the first time, she saw something other than cold calculation in his face, a flicker of old grief, quickly masked. "I am sorry for your loss. It was a long time ago." He retreated behind his aristocratic mask. "My apartments are in the East Wing. We share a connecting door, but it will remain locked unless you choose otherwise. Your privacy will be respected." "And what about you?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Will your privacy be respected as well?" His eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I may be trapped in this marriage, but I will not be made a fool. If you have a mistress, if you intend to continue liaisons while I play the dutiful wife, I want to know now." The silence stretched between them, charged with tension. "I do not have a mistress," he said finally. "I have not been with a woman in over 2 years. I have no interest in such entanglements." He stepped closer, and she caught again that scent of sandalwood and earth. "When I said this would be a marriage in name only, I meant it completely. I will make no demands on you, Lady Marin, none whatsoever." She should have been relieved. Instead, she felt oddly disappointed. "Dinner is at 7, he continued, turning toward the door. "Formal dress. I will introduce you to the household properly, and we will discuss how to announce our marriage to society. Wait." He paused, hand on the doorframe. "You said you have not been with anyone in 2 years. Why?" His back remained turned. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Because 2 years ago I lost someone I loved, and I have had no desire to replace her." He left before she could respond, the door closing softly behind him. Marin stood in her magnificent prison, surrounded by luxury she had never dreamed of, and realized that the cold, calculating Duke of Dunmere was far more complicated than he appeared. The first week at Ashworth House passed in an uncomfortable dance of avoidance and necessity. Marin learned the rhythms of the household. Breakfast at 8 in the morning room, where the Duke read correspondence, and she pretended to eat toast. Luncheon was informal, usually taken separately. Tea at 4, which she generally spent in the library, losing herself in books to escape the strangeness of her new reality. Dinner at 7, formal and silent, with 24 candles and enough silverware to confuse a foreign dignitary. They spoke when required and retreated to their separate corners when not. But slowly, incrementally, patterns emerged. She discovered that the Duke rose at 6 each morning to fence in the private gymnasium on the 3rd floor. The clash of blades against his instructors became her morning alarm, oddly comforting in its regularity. She learned that he took his coffee black and scalding, that he despised incompetence with a passion bordering on religious fervor, and that he had a habit of dragging his fingers through his hair when frustrated, leaving it perpetually disheveled by midday. He learned that she preferred tea with honey, that she read voraciously and across all subjects, and that she had a tendency to talk to herself while thinking through problems, a habit she had never managed to break. On the 4th day, he found her in the library. She had not heard him enter. She was perched on a rolling ladder, reaching for a volume on the top shelf, muttering calculations under her breath. If the annual yield is 7%, and the principal is reinvested quarterly, then over 10 years the compound interest would be. She stretched further, fingers brushing the spine of the book she wanted. "You will fall," Marin yelped, grabbing the ladder for balance. The Duke stood below her, arms crossed, watching with reluctant amusement tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Must you sneak up on people?" "I walked in through the door, hardly sneaking." He moved closer, steadying the ladder with one hand. "What are you calculating?" "Nothing." She descended hastily, clutching the book to her chest like a shield. "Just idle thoughts." Those did not sound like idle thoughts. They sounded like compound interest calculations. His eyes dropped to the book she held. Principles of Estate Management and Agricultural Economics. Light reading? Heat flooded her cheeks. "I was curious. About agricultural economics? About your estates." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "About this household. About how everything works. I may be a prisoner here, but I refuse to be an ignorant one." He was quiet for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You are not a prisoner." "No? Then I am free to leave whenever I choose?" "No. But neither are you confined to your rooms or forbidden from engaging in household matters." He released the ladder and moved to a nearby chair, settling into it with the easy grace of a man accustomed to owning everything around him. "If you wish to understand the estates, I will teach you." Marin stared at him. "What?" "I manage 12 properties across England and Scotland, employing over 3,000 people. The administration is complex and, frankly, tedious. If you genuinely wish to understand it, I have no objection to including you." "Why would you do that?" "Because you are my wife." He said it simply, without inflection. "Whatever the circumstances that brought us here, that fact remains. My mother managed the household accounts alongside my father for 30 years. She understood every aspect of the Ashworth holdings. I see no reason why you should be any different." It was, Marin realized, the first genuine kindness he had shown her. "Very well," she said slowly. "Teach me." And so he did. They spent the next afternoon in his study, surrounded by ledgers and maps. He explained the tenant farming system, the crop rotation schedules, and the investments in railway stocks that had tripled the family fortune over the past decade. She asked questions. He answered them. And somewhere in the midst of discussing wool prices and drainage improvements, something shifted between them. "You have a gift for numbers," he observed as evening approached, and they finally set aside the account books. "Who taught you?" "My father." The admission came easier now. He believed women should understand money, even if society disagreed. He said ignorance was the surest path to poverty. He was right. Yes. She looked down at her hands. He was right about many things, and wrong about others. The Duke was quiet for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke. "I blamed him, you know. When I first learned the full scope of what our fathers had arranged, I blamed your father for putting me in this position, for forcing this marriage onto both of us. And now? Now I understand that desperation makes people do terrible things." His voice was low, reflective. He was trying to save his family. My father was trying to secure the bloodline. Neither of them considered our feelings, because to them, we were pieces on a chessboard. Means to an end. Does that make it acceptable? No, but it makes it understandable. He rose, moving to the window. The setting sun cast long shadows across his face. "I will not pretend to be pleased with this situation, Lady Marin. But I am beginning to think that of all the women my father could have chosen, you are perhaps the least objectionable." "High praise indeed. For me, it is." He turned to look at her, and something in his face made her stomach flutter unexpectedly. "You are intelligent, practical, unafraid to challenge me. These are not qualities I expected in a wife." "What did you expect?" "Someone simpering. Someone who would accept my fortune in exchange for blind obedience, and ask nothing more." "I'm afraid I have never been good at blind obedience." "No." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I'm beginning to see that." The clock chimed 7. dinner time. They walked together toward the dining room, and for the first time, the silence between them felt less like a wall and more like a bridge. "Your Grace," Marin said as they reached the doors. "You said you lost someone 2 years ago, someone you loved." His steps faltered. "Yes." "Will you tell me about her someday?" He looked at her for a long moment, those storm-gray eyes searching her face for something she could not name. "Perhaps," he said finally, "when you are ready to hear it." It was not an answer, but it was a beginning. The Duchess of Waverly's annual garden party was the first true test. 3 weeks had passed since Marin's arrival at Ashworth House. 3 weeks of shared breakfasts and estate lessons and carefully maintained distance. 3 weeks of learning the rhythms of her strange new life and the even stranger man who had become her husband. Now, standing before her mirror in a gown of pale rose silk that had been delivered that morning from the finest modiste in London, she faced reality. Today, society would learn that the Duke of Dunmare had a wife. "You look lovely, my lady." Phoebe, the lady's maid assigned to her, tucked a final pin into Marin's upswept hair. "His Grace will be most pleased." Marin doubted that very much. A knock at the connecting door made her stiffen. She had never seen it open, had almost forgotten it existed. "Come in." The Duke entered, and Marin felt warmth rise to her cheeks despite herself. He was dressed impeccably in a dove-gray coat that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, his dark hair tamed into something approaching respectability, his cravat tied with mathematical precision. He looked every inch the aristocrat, cold and untouchable. Then his eyes found her, and his expression shifted in a way that made her breath falter. "You look—" He stopped. Started again. "That color suits you." "Thank you." She smoothed her skirts, suddenly nervous. "I confess I am not certain I am ready for this." No one is ever ready for the Duchess of Waverly's garden party. It is designed to be overwhelming. He moved closer, producing a velvet box from his pocket. "However, you will need this." Marin opened the box and gasped. Inside lay a necklace of sapphires and diamonds, the stones catching the light like captured stars. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "This was my mother's," the Duke said quietly. "The Ashworth sapphires. They are traditionally worn by the Duchess of Dunmare at her first public appearance. I cannot wear this. You can. You must." He lifted the necklace from its case. "Turn around." She obeyed, awareness flooding through her as his fingers brushed the nape of her neck. The sapphires settled against her collarbone, cool and impossibly heavy. "There." His voice was low, close to her ear. "Now, you look like a duchess." When she turned back to face him, the air between them felt charged with something unspoken. "Shall we?" He offered his arm. She took it. The garden party was everything she had feared, and nothing she had expected. The Duchess of Waverly's estate sprawled across manicured acres, dotted with silk pavilions and wandering guests in their finest attire. The moment Marin and the Duke arrived, a hush fell over the nearest cluster of partygoers. Then the whispers began. "Is that Dunmere? Who is that woman? Wearing the Ashworth sapphires? Good heavens! Did he actually marry someone?" The Duke's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. "Breathe," he murmured. "They are merely curious. Let them look." They are staring. They are always staring. One learns to ignore it. Easy for him to say. He had been born to this. Their hostess descended upon them within moments, a formidable woman in puce satin, whose eyes gleamed with barely contained excitement. "Dunmare, you dark horse, you absolute mystery, married, and not a word to anyone." The Duchess of Waverly seized both of Marin's hands. "And this must be the bride. My dear, you must tell me everything. How did you snare the most elusive bachelor in England?" Marin's mind went blank. She had not prepared for this question. How could she possibly explain that she had not snared him, that she had been traded like livestock, that she had learned of her own marriage from a stranger in a darkened room? "We met through family connections," the Duke said smoothly, his arm sliding around Marin's waist. "Our fathers arranged the match some years ago. We have simply been waiting for the appropriate time to make it public." "How wonderfully old-fashioned," the Duchess beamed. "And clearly successful. You look utterly besotted with her, Dunmere. I never thought I would see the day." Marin glanced up at her husband, expecting cold formality. Instead, she found him gazing down at her with an expression of such convincing warmth that her heart stumbled. "Lady Marin is extraordinary," he said quietly. "I am merely fortunate she agreed to have me." It was a lie. She knew it was a lie. And yet her foolish heart stuttered nonetheless. The afternoon proceeded in a blur of introductions and conversations. Marin smiled until her cheeks ached, answered questions with carefully rehearsed responses, and clung to the Duke's arm like a lifeline. Through it all, he remained at her side, deflecting the most intrusive inquiries, steering her away from the most vicious gossips, playing the devoted husband with a skill that bordered on alarming. "You are very good at this," she murmured during a rare moment alone. "At what?" "Pretending." Something tightened in his jaw. "Who says I am pretending?" Before she could respond, a new voice interrupted them. "Dunmere." What an unexpected surprise. The man who approached was perhaps 50, with silver hair and a smile that did not reach his eyes. Everything about him radiated polished malice. "Hargrove." The Duke's tone could have frozen the ornamental lake. "I did not realize you would be attending. How could I miss such a momentous occasion? The mysterious Duke finally takes a bride." Lord Hargrove's gaze swept over Marin with undisguised appraisal. "Lady Marin Lydgate, is it not? I knew your father." Marin's blood chilled. "You did?" "Oh yes, we were quite well acquainted toward the end. Such a tragedy, his passing." His smile sharpened. So many loose ends left unresolved. The Duke stepped forward, positioning himself between Marin and Lord Hargrove. "This is neither the time nor the place for such discussions." "No? Then perhaps we should arrange a more private conversation. I have some matters regarding the late Lord Lydgate's affairs that the new Duchess might find illuminating." The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. "Good day, Hargrove." The Duke's voice was ice. "We have other guests to greet." He steered Marin away before Hargrove could respond, his grip on her arm tight enough to bruise. "Who is that man?" she demanded, once they were out of earshot. "No one of consequence. He knew my father. He mentioned loose ends. That did not sound inconsequential. Marin." The use of her given name without title stopped her short. "Trust me when I say that man is dangerous. Whatever he claims to know, whatever he implies, do not engage with him. But, please," the word was rough, almost desperate, "let me handle this. I will explain everything. But not here. Not now." She looked up at him, at the tension carved into every line of his face, at the protective fury burning in his eyes. "Very well," she said finally. "But you will explain. Tonight." "Tonight," he agreed. "I promise." They did not speak on the carriage ride home. Marin sat across from the Duke, watching his face in the flickering lamplight, trying to decipher the emotions that moved beneath his carefully controlled surface. He stared out the window, at nothing, his jaw clenched, his hands fisted on his thighs. Lord Hargrove's words echoed in her mind, loose ends left unresolved. What had her father been involved in? What secrets had he taken to his grave? When they arrived at Ashworth House, the Duke escorted her to the library instead of the drawing room. He closed the door, poured 2 glasses of brandy, and handed her one without asking if she wanted it. "Drink," he said. "You will need it." She drank. The brandy burned a path down her throat, settling into her stomach like liquid courage. "Lord Hargrove," the Duke began, moving to stand before the fireplace, "was a business associate of my father's. They were involved in various ventures together, some of them less than legitimate." "What kind of ventures?" "The kind that destroy lives." His voice was flat, emotionless. "They bought and sold debts, manipulated markets, bankrupted competitors through predatory practices. My father built half the Ashworth fortune on the misery of others." Marin set down her glass carefully. "And my father? How was he involved?" "He was one of their victims." The Duke finally turned to face her. "They targeted him deliberately, convinced him to invest in ventures designed to fail, extended credit at usurious rates, then called in the debts when they knew he could not pay. My father's financial ruin." Her voice emerged as a whisper. "It was not bad luck. It was deliberate." "Yes." "And the marriage contract? Was that part of their scheme as well?" "No." He crossed the room, sinking into the chair across from her. "That was my father's idea, but for different reasons. By the time your father came begging for help, he had already realized he had been manipulated. He threatened to expose everything. My father offered the marriage alliance as both solution and insurance. Your father's silence in exchange for his daughter's future." Marin felt sick. "So I was a bribe. You were a guarantee. As long as our families were united, neither could destroy the other without destroying themselves. And Lord Hargrove? He was cut out of the arrangement. He has resented it ever since." The Duke leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "He has been looking for leverage against me for years. He believes your father left evidence of their crimes, evidence that could destroy him. He thinks you know where it is. I do not know anything. I believe you, but Hargrove will not stop until he is certain." The fire crackled in the silence. Marin's mind reeled with revelations, each one more devastating than the last. "Why did you not tell me this before?" "Because I was trying to protect you. Because the more you knew, the more danger you would be in. Because—" He stopped, pushing his fingers through his hair in that gesture she had come to recognize. "Because I was ashamed." "Ashamed?" "Of my father. Of my family's legacy. Of the blood money that built this house, and funded my education, and allowed me to sit in Parliament, pretending to care about justice, while knowing that everything I have was purchased with other people's suffering." She had never heard him speak with such raw honesty. It transformed him, stripped away the aristocratic armor to reveal something wounded and human beneath. "That is why you care so much about reform," she said slowly. "The factory laws, the workers' rights. You are trying to make amends. I'm trying to be better than he was. Whether I am succeeding is another matter entirely." Marin rose from her chair and moved to kneel beside his. It was improper. It was presumptuous. She did not care. "You are not your father," she said quietly. "His sins are not yours to carry. They are if I do nothing to correct them. But you are doing something. You are fighting for change. You are trying to make things right." She reached up, touching his cheek before she could think better of it. "That matters, Caius. That matters more than you know." He went utterly still at her touch. His eyes, those storm-gray depths, searched her face with an intensity that set her blood racing. "You called me by my name." "Did I?" She started to withdraw her hand, but he caught it, holding it against his cheek. "Say it again." "Caius." His composure fractured. Something raw and desperate surfaced in his expression, achingly vulnerable. "I've been alone for so long," he whispered. "I had forgotten what it felt like to have someone see me, actually see me." "I see you." "I know," his voice cracked. "That is what terrifies me." They stayed like that for a long moment, her hand against his face, his fingers wrapped around her wrist, the fire crackling between them. "You asked about the woman I lost," he said finally. "Do you still want to know?" "Only if you want to tell me." He released her hand and leaned back, though something in his posture had softened, become less guarded. Her name was Cordelia. She was the daughter of a viscount, beautiful and spirited, and everything I thought I wanted. We were engaged for 6 months. "What happened?" "She discovered the truth about my family's business practices, about the blood on the Ashworth fortune." His smile was bitter. "She could not bear to be associated with such scandal. She broke the engagement and married a baronet 3 months later. I'm sorry. Do not be. She was right to leave. I would have made her miserable, and she would have made me worse." He looked at Marin then, really looked at her. "But it taught me something important." "What?" "That I could never have a marriage built on illusion, on pretending to be something I am not." He rose, helping her to her feet. "That is why I told you the truth tonight, because whatever this is between us, I will not let it be built on lies." Marin's chest tightened. "What is this between us?" "I do not know yet." He was still holding her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "But I would like to find out, if you are willing." She should pull away, should retreat to the safety of distance and formality, should remember that this was an arrangement, a transaction, a marriage of convenience and nothing more. Instead, she stepped closer. "I am willing," she said softly. "I am terrified, but I am willing." His smile then was unlike any she had seen before, warm and genuine and heartbreakingly hopeful. "That," he said, "is the bravest thing anyone has ever said to me." The weeks that followed were the happiest of Marin's life. They took breakfast together and lingered over coffee, discussing politics and philosophy and the mundane details of estate management. They walked in the gardens each afternoon, his hand finding hers as naturally as breathing. They dined by candlelight and talked until the candles guttered, revealing pieces of themselves they had never shown anyone else. She learned that he feared thunderstorms, a weakness he blamed on a childhood incident involving a lightning-struck tree and a beloved pony. He learned that she cried at poetry, but refused to cry at funerals, a defense mechanism she had developed after her father's death. She discovered that he laughed more easily than she had expected once his defenses were lowered. He discovered that she had a wicked sense of humor that delighted him endlessly. They did not touch beyond the holding of hands, the brush of fingers, and the occasional lingering glance that said more than words ever could. But the air between them grew charged with possibility, with promise, with something that felt dangerously like hope. One evening, 6 weeks after the garden party, they sat together in the library as a storm raged outside. Lightning flickered through the windows, and Caius had gone pale and quiet, his knuckles white where he gripped the arm of his chair. Without thinking, Marin rose and crossed to sit beside him on the settee. She took his hand in hers and began to speak, telling him stories of nothing important, keeping her voice low and steady until the storm passed. When the thunder finally faded, he turned to her with an expression that stopped her heart. "Marin." "Yes?" "I need to tell you something. Something I should have said weeks ago." Her blood quickened. "What is it?" He took both her hands in his grip almost painfully tight. "I have tried to fight this. I have tried to maintain the boundaries we established, to keep this as the business arrangement we agreed upon. But I cannot do it anymore. Caius, let me finish, please." He drew a shaking breath. "I am in love with you. Completely, irrevocably, terrifyingly in love with you. And I know that was never part of our agreement. I know you did not ask for this. I know you came into this marriage unwillingly, and I have no right to burden you with my feelings." She kissed him. She had not planned it, had not thought about it consciously. But suddenly her hands were in his hair, and her lips were on his, and he was kissing her back with a desperation that stole her breath. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, his forehead rested against hers. "I take it," he said unsteadily, "that you do not object to my feelings. I love you." The words tumbled out, unstoppable. "I have loved you for weeks. I did not want to. I tried not to. But you are impossible to resist, Caius Ashworth, and I am tired of trying." His laugh was shaky with relief. "You love me?" "Heaven help me, yes." He kissed her again, gentler this time, a kiss full of wonder and reverence, and the tender beginnings of something that could last a lifetime. "Marry me," he said against her lips. She pulled back, confused. "We are already married." "I know, but I want to do it properly this time. I want to stand before God and witnesses and choose you. I want the world to know that you are mine not because of contracts or obligations, but because we love each other. Will you give me that, Maren? Will you marry me again?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. Outside, the storm had passed, and the first stars were appearing through breaking clouds. Everything was perfect, which was, of course, when everything fell apart. The letter arrived the next morning. It was addressed to the Duchess of Dunmere and bore no return address. Maren opened it at the breakfast table, while Caius reviewed parliamentary correspondence across from her. "Your Grace, I have information regarding your father's dealings with the late Duke of Dunmere. Information that your husband has kept from you. Information that proves your marriage is not merely inconvenient, but invalid. If you wish to know the truth, meet me at the Blackwood Coffee House at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Come alone, or do not come at all. A friend." Maren's blood ran cold. "What is it?" Caius looked up, instantly alert. "Maren, you have gone white." "Nothing." She folded the letter quickly, slipping it beneath her napkin. "Just a note from my sister. She's being dramatic, as usual." But her hand trembled, and Caius was not fooled. "Show me." "It is nothing, truly." "Maren!" His voice was quiet but implacable. "We promised no lies between us." She had. She had promised exactly that. Slowly, she handed him the letter. He read it in silence, his expression growing darker with each line. When he finished, he set it down with careful precision. "You will not go." "I beg your pardon?" "This is a trap. Hargrove's work, without question. If you go to that meeting, you will be placing yourself in danger. And if I do not go, I will never know the truth. You know the truth. I told you everything." "Did you?" She rose from the table, anger and fear churning in her stomach. "The letter claims our marriage is invalid. Is that true?" "It is not." "How can you be certain?" "Because I have had the contract reviewed by a dozen solicitors. The proxy ceremony was legal. Our marriage is binding and legitimate." "Then why would someone claim otherwise?" Caius rose as well, his jaw tight. "Because Hargrove is trying to drive a wedge between us. He cannot destroy me directly, so he is attempting to destroy my marriage instead. Or perhaps there is something you have not told me." The words hung between them, sharp as knives. "You think I am still lying to you?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "After everything I have shared? After last night? I do not know what to think." Maren wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. "I was married without my knowledge. My father sold me to pay his debts, Every truth I have learned since coming here has been another betrayal. How can I be certain this is not another? Because I love you. He crossed the room, gripping her shoulders. Because I would never hurt you. Because you are everything to me now, and I would rather die than see you harmed. She wanted to believe him. Every fiber of her being screamed to trust this man who had shown her more kindness in 2 months than she had known in years. But the letter burned in her mind like poison. I need time, she whispered, to think, to understand. Marin, please, Caius, do not ask me to choose between my need for truth and my love for you. Not yet. His hands dropped from her shoulders. His expression shuddered, becoming the cold, aristocratic mask she had not seen in weeks. Take all the time you need, he said stiffly. I will be in my study. He left without looking back. Marin stood alone in the breakfast room, clutching a letter that threatened to destroy everything she had come to cherish. And she had no idea what to do. She went to the coffee house. She knew it was foolish. She knew Caius would be furious. But the questions burned too hot to ignore, and she needed answers that only this mysterious correspondent could provide. The Blackwood Coffee House was in an unfashionable part of London, the kind of establishment frequented by merchants and clerks rather than nobility. Marin wore her plainest dress and a heavy veil, hoping to avoid recognition. Lord Hargrove was waiting at a corner table. Lady Marin. He rose with a smile that made her skin crawl. So good of you to come. Please, sit. I prefer to stand. She remained near the door, ready to flee if necessary. You claim to have information about my marriage. Share it. Straight to business. I admire that. He resumed his seat, gesturing to the chair across from him. But this conversation will take time, and you are drawing attention. Sit. She sat, perching on the edge of the chair like a bird ready for flight. Your father and the old Duke signed more than one contract, Hargrove began. The marriage arrangement was merely the visible piece. Beneath it lay a second agreement, one that your current husband has taken great pains to conceal. What kind of agreement? A financial one. Your father was not merely in debt. He was a participant in certain ventures. Ventures that would see him hanged if they ever came to light. You are lying. Am I? Hargrove produced a sheaf of papers from his coat. These are records of transactions, shipments, payments, all bearing your father's signature, all connected to activities that the Crown considers treasonous. Marin did not take the papers. What does this have to do with my marriage? Everything, my dear. The marriage contract contains a clause you were never meant to see, a clause that makes your husband responsible for your father's crimes. If the truth emerges, Dunmere faces ruin, disgrace, possibly imprisonment. That makes no sense. Why would anyone agree to such terms? Because the old Duke was dying and desperate to secure his legacy. Because your father threatened exposure unless his daughter was protected. Because Dunmere the Younger had no choice once his father was gone. Hargrove leaned forward. Your husband married you not out of obligation or affection, Lady Marin. He married you to ensure your silence, to keep you close enough to control. The words hit like physical blows. I do not believe you. Then ask him yourself. Ask him about Clause 17 of the original contract. Ask him why he kept you ignorant of your own marriage for 6 months. Ask him why he suddenly decided to announce it now, just when I began asking questions. Marin's mind spun. Everything Hargrove said aligned with facts she already knew. The timing, the secrecy, the reluctance with which Caius had revealed even partial truths. But it also contradicted everything she had felt. Every tender moment, every whispered confession, every kiss that had felt like a promise. What do you want? She demanded. Why are you telling me this? Because I want justice. His eyes glittered with barely concealed malice. Your husband's family destroyed mine. His father cheated me out of a fortune and left me to rot while he built an empire. I want Dunmere to suffer as I have suffered. And you think using me will accomplish that? I think you deserve to know the truth. He slid the papers across the table. Take these, read them, and when you are ready to discuss what happens next, send word. I can help you escape this marriage, Lady Marin. I can give you your freedom. Marin stared at the papers, at the man who offered them, at the poisoned apple disguised as salvation. No. Hargrove's smile faltered. No? I will not be your weapon against my husband. She rose from the table, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. Whatever secrets exist, whatever truths have been hidden, I will discover them myself, not through manipulation and revenge. You are making a mistake, perhaps. She met his eyes without flinching. But it is my mistake to make. She turned to leave, then paused. The papers still lay on the table. Evidence, whatever their truth. If there were secrets to uncover, she would examine them herself rather than take Hargrove's word. She snatched them up, tucking them into her reticule. She walked out of the coffee house with her head high and her heart breaking. Because despite her brave words, the doubts Hargrove had planted were already taking root. Caius was waiting for her when she returned. He stood in the entrance hall, still as a statue, his face carved from stone. Behind him, Mrs. Blackthorne and Pemberton hovered with matching expressions of concern. "Leave us," Caius said without looking at them. The servants melted away. "You went to meet him." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I asked you not to, and you went anyway. I needed answers. And did you find them?" Marin reached into her reticule and withdrew the papers Hargrove had given her. Evidence to examine, proof to verify or refute. He gave me these. He claims they prove my father was involved in treasonous activities. He claims our marriage contract contains a clause that makes you responsible for those crimes. She held out the papers. "Is it true?" Caius took the documents without looking at them. "Yes." The single word shattered something inside her. "Yes?" Clause 17 of the original contract states that upon marriage, all legal and financial obligations of the Lydgate family transfer to the Ashworth estate, including any criminal liability. He finally looked at her, and she saw devastation in his eyes. "I learned the full implications only after Hargrove began making threats. By then, you were already my wife, and I could not bear to burden you with more ugliness. Why did you not tell me then?" "Because I was trying to protect you, because I hoped I could resolve the situation without you ever needing to know. Because," his voice broke, "because I was afraid that if you knew, you would look at me the way you are looking at me now." Marin felt tears pricking her eyes. "And my father? The treasonous activities. He smuggled weapons," Caius said quietly. "During the wars. He ran shipments to both sides, profiting from the bloodshed. When the Crown began investigating, he destroyed the evidence and fled into debt to cover his tracks." Marin lowered herself to sit on the bottom step of the grand staircase, her legs no longer steady enough to hold her. "My father was a traitor. He was a desperate man who made terrible choices, not so different from mine." Caius stared at his hands. "My father knew about the smuggling. He used it as leverage, blackmailing yours for years, before finally offering the marriage contract as an alternative. Your father accepted because he had no other choice. And the proxy ceremony? Was legal and binding, as I told you. When Hargrove began making threats, I realized the full scope of what Clause 17 meant. But voiding the marriage would have exposed everything. So you kept silent. I kept silent. I told myself it was protection, that you were better off not knowing. that we could build something real and leave the ugliness in the past. He finally met her eyes. I was wrong. I have been wrong about everything. Maren sat in silence, letting the revelations settle over her like snow. Her father, a traitor. Her husband, complicit in concealment. Her entire life, built on foundations of deception and desperation. And yet, Hargrove wanted me to use these documents against you, she said slowly. He wanted me to help him destroy you. And will you? She looked at this man, this complicated, flawed, infuriating man who had lied to her and protected her and loved her in equal measure, who had carried the weight of two families' sins and tried to build something clean from the wreckage. No, she said, I will not. His breath caught. Maren, I am angry with you, furious. You kept things from me that I had every right to know. You made choices that affected my entire life without consulting me. I know. But Hargrove's revenge would destroy more than just you. It would destroy my mother, my sister, every tenant on every estate who depends on the Ashworth fortune. It would accomplish nothing except spreading more misery. What are you saying? She took his hand in hers, her grip firm despite her trembling. I am saying that I choose us, despite everything, despite the lies and the secrets and the impossible situation we have found ourselves in. I choose to stay and fight for this marriage rather than let Hargrove win. You forgive me? I am not certain I do. Not yet. But I love you, and I believe you love me. And I believe that together we are stronger than apart. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with all the courage she possessed. So here is what we are going to do. We are going to review those documents carefully, find whatever evidence they contain of Hargrove's own crimes, and use it against him. We are going to face him together, and we are going to build a future that neither of our fathers could have imagined. A future based on truth, on partnership, on choosing each other every day, no matter what. Caius stared at her as if she were the sunrise after an endless night. You are extraordinary, he breathed. Do you know that? Utterly, impossibly extraordinary. I am also exhausted and hungry and in desperate need of tea. She stood, pulling him up with her. We can be emotional later. Right now, we have a villain to defeat. Despite everything, he laughed. A genuine, startled laugh that echoed through the entrance hall. I love you, Maren Ashworth. I love you too. She kissed him briefly. Now, let us save our family. Lord Hargrove was arrested 3 weeks later. It turned out that the documents he had compiled as evidence against the Ashworths also contained proof of his own crimes. Crimes far more recent and verifiable than anything connected to the old Duke or Lord Lydgate. Caius's solicitors found discrepancies, investigators found witnesses, and Hargrove found himself in chains, bound for trial, and the inevitable disgrace that awaited. The scandal touched the Ashworth name only glancingly. Yes, there were whispers about the old Duke's dealings. Yes, questions arose about the marriage contract and its unusual circumstances. But Caius faced them all with unflinching honesty, admitting his father's wrongs and pledging to make amends. Society, it turned out, had more appetite for redemption than revenge. And so, on a brilliant spring morning, exactly 1 year after her midnight conversation in Lady Hartington's drawing room, Maren Ashworth, née Lydgate, stood before the altar of St. George's Church and married her husband for the second time. You look beautiful, Caius whispered as she reached his side. You look nervous, she whispered back, terrified. What if you change your mind? I changed my mind about you months ago. That is why I am here. The ceremony was small and intimate. Maren's mother, restored to health by the finest physicians Ashworth money could buy, wept openly into her handkerchief. Ottilie served as maid of honor and pronounced the entire event ridiculously romantic for two people who started out despising each other. When the vicar asked if anyone objected to the union, Caius turned to face the congregation with a challenging glare that made Marin laugh despite herself. No one objected. They spoke vows they had written themselves, promises of honesty and partnership, and love chosen freely rather than compelled by contract. When Caius slipped a new ring onto her finger, a simple gold band engraved with the date of their first marriage, Marin felt the last traces of resentment dissolve like morning mist. "I believe," the vicar announced, "this is the part where you may kiss your bride." "Finally," Caius said, and kissed her so thoroughly that Ottilie whistled and the vicar turned pink. 5 years later. The nursery at Dunmere Castle was in chaos. Marin stood in the doorway, watching her husband attempt to dress their 4-year-old twins for their grandmother's birthday celebration. Edmund, named for her father, despite everything, had somehow gotten his head stuck in the armhole of his little coat. Helena, named for no one in particular because Marin had liked the sound of it, had stripped off her stockings and was currently hiding under the bed. "This is your fault," Caius said, not looking up from his struggle with Edmund. "You wanted children." "I wanted one child. You are the one who insisted on spares. I did not insist on twins. That was entirely your doing. I believe you had some involvement in the process." He finally freed Edmund and looked up at her with that smile, the warm one, the real one that still made her heart flutter after all these years. "Come help me retrieve our daughter before she goes feral." They coaxed Helena from beneath the bed with promises of cake and presents. They dressed both children in their finest clothes and presented them to their grandmother, who declared them the most perfect creatures ever born and immediately began spoiling them with sweets. Later, after the celebration had wound down and the twins had been carried to bed by their exhausted nanny, Caius found Marin in the library. She was sitting in her favorite chair, reading a treatise on agricultural reform that she was co-authoring with her husband for presentation to Parliament. "The children are asleep," he reported, settling into the chair beside her. "Helena asked if she could marry the stable boy when she grows up. I told her she had to wait until she was at least 6. Reasonable. I thought so." He reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Happy?" She looked at him, this man who had begun as a stranger and a captor and had become her partner in everything. They had faced scandal and crisis and the complicated legacy of their fathers. They had built something real from the wreckage of arrangements made without their consent. "Deliriously," she said. "Good." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I intend to keep you that way." "That is quite a promise." "I am quite a duke." She laughed and pulled him closer, and he kissed her as the fire crackled and the stars wheeled overhead. Somewhere in the house, the Ashworth sapphires gleamed in their velvet case, waiting to be passed down to the next generation. Somewhere in London, society continued its endless dance of scandal and ambition. Somewhere in the churchyard of a small parish, Edmund Lydgate lay beneath stone that bore only his name and dates, his complicated legacy finally at rest. But here, in this library that had witnessed their first tentative truce and their deepest confessions and 1,000 quiet evenings together, Marin Ashworth knew exactly what she had. A love that had not been chosen for her, a love she had chosen for herself, and that, in the end, made all the difference.